Hello, thank you so much for joining me again today. This is going to be a bit of a strange one, but this is a painting I did quite some time ago, and I've decided that I don't want to keep it. For anybody out there who's painted and thought, what do I do with something I don't like? Well, here is an example. I love the texture, I love the way it was built up with a sand paint mixture, but I don't like the colours, so I'm going to change that. First thing I'm going to do is take a deep breath and actually cover the whole thing with just titanium white paint. This is just ordinary paint and I'm just going to paint it on quite thickly, and it probably will take a couple of coats. Then I'm just going to go in with my palette knife into the wet paint and just make some little sort of blob marks. And don't forget to do the edges. The edges of your canvas can hold a lot of the old paint. Now I'm using a very light mix of Payne's Grey. I like Payne's Grey because it's a bluish grey, which is nice. And I'm just sort of mixing it into the central area, into the texture, not too heavily and very much mixed with white. Now I'm adding a mix of buff titanium and white. It looks a little yellow at the moment, but it is some more of a sandy colour. And then I'm actually going to let this dry completely. Then I'm going to go in now with the black acrylic ink, which is very dramatic. And at this point I have to apologise. My original video actually didn't continue recording, so it's missed a chunk, but I'm going to go over now and show you what I did. Going in with the black ink again and just wetting it with the tap water in the spray, just to make it move around into the texture, and just adding it with the dropper into different areas and just building up those layers. This is basically what I did with the first layer that you can see. And then I'm going in with the gold ink on the top, and it doesn't move quite as easily as the black because it's got the metallic components, but I'm going to wet it again with the spray, and then I will be using my catalyst blade just to go in and help that to move around, get it into that texture, just spread it around very softly. It's a really useful tool for that. Now I'm still going to add in areas of white. This is using a soft flat brush, and it helps to graze it over the texture. You can see we've got lots of texture here, so if you go in lightly over the top, it just catches on the raised areas and you can blend those colours and soften them down. We don't want anything too harsh at this point. So now I'm going to go in underneath with the Prussian blue. It's a lovely colour of blue, and again it looks quite bright on here, but when we start to build up other layers it will soften down nicely. So putting it around this side of the painting as well. These are the only 5 colours in this painting, so it's a very limited palette once again. Gold, Prussian blue, black, white and the buff titanium. So I just keep adding little bits of white where I want to soften down the colours and keep that moving so that it's still got that freshness to it and interest. So using that catalyst blade again just to move that paint about, lovely and soft, just keeping that moving. And you can see as we start to cover up some of the colours, it just softens down. Those areas of the black ink start to soften and lose their harsh appearance, and you can still blend. Now here I've decided I want to add a little bit more black underneath. It's a bit of an empty space. So I've just wet the area first with clean water. And now I'm dropping the ink in so that we can get it to start to move with the spray. Just using the spray bottle again and then doing the tilting trick to get it to move down. And it will move through the area we've just placed the water. And if it turns out a little bit heavy, which it has in these areas, just use a damp tissue, paper towel, just to dab it out. If it's a little stubborn, just wet it down with the brush again and clean water. And if you dab rather than wipe, you will still maintain the texture and the colour where you want it. And then you can just keep adding and just keep building that colour, making sure that all the areas are balanced. Soften it out with the wet brush and just keep on moving. The beauty of this is if you have what you might want to call a mistake, then it's easy to correct using the paints and the tools that we've got here. You can cover things up and nobody's going to know any the different. You will be able to correct it and put it back to the way you want it quite simply. Now I'm going to go back in with the buff titanium and white titanium mix. I want to add a little warmth to some of these areas, but without adding too much orange sort of colour, so it's quite diluted down. Remember that acrylic ink always dries slightly darker, so if you're in any doubt, make it slightly lighter. You can always go back in later. And remember to just balance up the canvas, so where you put it one side, you might want to patch on the other side. I decided that this little bit of dark black ink here was a little bit too intense, so I'm just using the very small palette knife with some white paint and just going over some of those areas, not particularly to get rid of them, but just to soften them down. By applying it over the top, we'll still have the colour beneath and you'll still end up with the texture that you want. So this is the beautiful gold paint that I'm using. It is actually by a company called Golden, and I'm just applying it here with this little palette knife. I'll show you in a moment exactly how much you will actually need. It really isn't an awful lot, but it just scrapes and grazes over those textured parts. The bits where it's raised, it will catch and highlight, and it just adds masses of interest and brings the colours that you've got out from the centre, continues that theme. And don't forget, you need to put some in the centre as well. So it just balances and just gives loads of interest there. And you can use the gold, you can use the white, you can use whatever colour you want that we've got on this palette. It will just keep adding emphasis and interest. So this is literally how much I use. I just hold the tube and just scrape the blade across, and that is more than enough to apply to your painting. If you put it on too thickly, you'll end up with areas where it sort of goes on and you have to take it off again. We just want to add highlights here. So now I'm back in with the Prussian blue, and again I'm going to add little bits of scrapes here and there. I've noticed in some areas we haven't got as much blue as in others, so I'm just adding it very gently into those areas now, and at the moment just scraping it onto the highlighted bits. I'm just going to blend that little bit with my finger. And don't forget to put some on the outer lying areas as well, because again that will pick the colour through. That bit blends really nicely with that bit of white that I'd got that was still wet, and then a little bit further towards the centre as well. Just keep it balanced and you will enjoy the result. Now feel that little central area there is just a little bit heavy. The dark is showing through a little bit too much. So again, using the flat brush and the white paint, I'm just going to graze those areas and soften down some of that harshness. We still want colour, but we don't want it that it sort of jumps up and hits you in the face. We want it all to blend and work quite nicely together. So any areas that you see that just strike you as a little bit intense, this is a great way to just soften them down, just until you're happy with them. If you're not sure whether you've done enough, my advice would be leave it alone for a little while, go out of the room, go and do something, have a brew, come back and look at it and see if there's any parts that take your eye straight to it. And I'm really quite happy with what we've done here. I'm a lot happier than I was with the original, but I would suggest doing something which is just turn it upside down. Have a look at it from a different angle and decide which you prefer. Personally, for me, this is the direction I like, and I'm going to find lots of interest in this as I look at it. I really hope that you've enjoyed this and that you feel that you may be able to do this with a painting perhaps that you're not keen on anymore, and you can convert it to something different. I hope that what you can see here is all the amazing texture we've got going on. It's a really fun project and I'm very glad that I did it. So have a look in the description for all the details of the products, and I will look forward to seeing you again for the next project very soon. In the meantime, keep painting. Thanks very much. Bye bye.